Hi, Barry.
Good morning.
Haven't seen you in a long time.
I haven't seen you either.
Good. Well, let's do a quick quorum call before I give my remarks, and then co-chair King gives his remarks. Sound good? So, Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor McKenney.
He is just coming on.
Okay. You can see him though? See her? Councillor McKenney?
They are here now.
Okay. Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington. Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Yes. Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Thank you. Member Conforti.
Not yet.
Okay. Member Halsall.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Member
That's
Conforti is
okay.
here.
That's okay. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Member Halsall. Member Podolsky. Yes.
Here.
Member Quinn. You hear Carolyn?
Not seeing.
And co-chair King is here and I'm here. Great, we have quorum for sure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special joint meeting of the Planning Committee and the Built Heritage Subcommittee. Today, we're going to consider proposed alterations in a revised site plan application needed to proceed with the planned addition to the much-loved Chateau Laurier at 1 Rideau Street. It's not standard practice for these two committees to meet jointly. In fact, this is the first time it's ever happened. But Chair King and I agreed that meeting jointly would be the most efficient way to deal with this matter. It allows us to streamline public submissions, avoiding duplication and eliminating the need for speakers to attend two separate meetings. In total, there will be 3 separate meetings of our two committees today, starting with a joint meeting together. That will give us all a chance to hear from public delegations on both the heritage application and the site plan application. Site plan matters are not something that the subcommittee would usually consider, but we decided it makes more sense for the joint committee to hear submissions on both matters together. Otherwise, delegations would need to present site plan comments and heritage comments separately over separate meetings on different days. So we're going to hear the public delegations together, and then we're going to adjourn and have a separate meeting of each committee, starting with the Built Heritage Subcommittee, followed by the Planning Committee. The subcommittee has no mandate to vote on the site plan matter. It's also required by statute to vote separately from the Planning Committee on the heritage matter. So after our joint meeting adjourns, the subcommittee will reconvene, as I said, to vote on the heritage reports. And after that, the Planning Committee will reconvene to vote on both reports. In a few minutes, staff will give us a presentation that encompasses both reports. Following that, I'll ask committee members to introduce any motions or directions they intend to move. That way, other members and staff will have an opportunity to review and clarify your motion during discussions. And public delegations will have the benefit of hearing motions prior to speaking. If you haven't already, make sure you send your motions to the committee coordinator and email to motions@ottawa.ca. After motions are introduced, we'll move directly to hearing delegations. Members can ask questions of delegations as usual, but we hold questions to staff until the committees meet separately after the joint meeting. Once all delegations have finished, we will adjourn the joint meeting and a special meeting of Built Heritage Subcommittee will be called to order. The subcommittee will consider the heritage permit matter only and can pose questions to staff before they deliberate, dispose of the matter, and adjourn. 15 minutes after that subcommittee meeting adjourns, we'll begin a special meeting of the Planning Committee to consider both the heritage and site plan applications. Again, the committee will ask questions of staff, deliberate, and then dispose of both matters. Recommendations from the Planning Committee meeting will rise to council on February the 24th. Now I'd like to outline a few logistical details before we proceed. I'm, we're into this far enough. You probably don't need to hear this, but it's for the record. I'm sure all committee and subcommittee members are familiar with Zoom meetings already, but I'll go through this for our public delegations. We ask everyone to keep your mic muted until you're called on to speak. You can use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen to signal that you want to speak. And if there are members of council or the subcommittee or staff who have joined the meeting by phone, simply press *9 to raise your hand. Our committee coordinators, along with Chair King and I, will watch for those cues. We have a number of delegations registered to speak today, and we've received numerous written submissions. The deadline to register to speak has passed at 8:30 this morning, but residents can still send written submissions to either of the committee coordinators, either Ms. Melody Duffany or Mr. Eric Pilo. Our coordinators will distribute submissions to all members of council as soon as they are able to prior to the council meeting on February 24th. As we proceed with the delegations, I'll announce the next 3 to 5 speakers. We don't have very many delegations today, so I'm not going to do that other than maybe as a courtesy. For those signed up to speak, if you experience technical difficulties when signing into the meeting, you can contact the clerk's office. The phone number to call is, do we already have all of our speakers on? Probably. The phone number to call is 613-580-2424, extension 20113. I'll remind you that our meetings are live streamed and archived on YouTube. So if you enable your camera when speaking, you will be visible to meeting participants, and you'll also show up on YouTube. When I call on a delegation to speak, please unmute your mic and begin. If you have provided a presentation to the committee coordinator, please tell her to advance the slides as necessary while you speak. Delegations have 5 minutes to make comments, and the coordinator will do her best or his best to give a 1-minute warning as the clock counts down. Once your 5 minutes are up, I will ask members whether they have any questions for you. When questions are finished, the coordinator will place the delegation back in the Zoom lobby on mute, where they can watch the rest of the meeting if they so wish. I should also point out that this meeting is set up with French and English language interpreters. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you will see an option for interpretation. For your convenience, you can select which audio channel you prefer to use, English or French. I've already done a roll call. And I noticed actually that Carolyn Quinn, hello Carolyn, you've joined us. Who else was I missing? Counselor, no, I don't think anybody. Okay.
Present.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest?
Hello? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to declare that I participated in the negotiated settlement between Heritage Ottawa and Larco, and I supported it at Heritage Ottawa. And I have notified the Integrity Commissioner. He has declared there is no conflict. However, I would like to not recuse myself, but I would like to abstain from voting.
Thank you, Carolyn. And Carolyn should say that again at the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting as well.
Yeah, I will.
When that reconvenes.
Thank you.
Sorry, point of
Thank
order,
you.
Chair.
Yes.
Is abstention allowed? I believe if you're at the table that you need to vote yes or no.
I will be.
Well, when the voting comes.
Yeah,
when-
yes, exactly.
when
Set
the
it up so
voting
that I will
starts.
be moved to attendee status at that time.
Right.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Now, before staff begin their presentation, Chair King and I would both like to provide some thoughts on what's before us today. The Chateau Laurier is a
Sorry,
beloved
Councillor
building.
Harder, I had my hand up. It's Barry Podolsky.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barry. Go ahead.
Yes, I too consulted with the Integrity Commissioner and co-chairs Harder and King. I do not have a conflict of interest to declare. However, since transparency is fundamental to the public trust in the city's process, as a public member of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, I'd like to declare, like Carolyn, that since Ottawa City Council in June 2019 approved the former LARCO proposal. I was actively involved with the public campaign to challenge the approved design. I was also actively involved in assisting Heritage Ottawa in its negotiations with LARCO to abandon the approved design and prepare a revised design that would be presented to the committees today. As the former chair of the Built Heritage Subcommittee during the previous term of council, I look forward to today's presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I don't see any other hands raised. We'll go back to,
Chair Harder, I just got
Yes.
notification from our committee coordinator that now might be a good time for me to read Member Hassel's declaration of interest. So I don't know if you
Yes.
permit me to do that.
absolutely. You're the
Okay.
co-chair. Go ahead.
So we did receive 2 declarations of interest from Member Hassel of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. I'll read them into the record. Declaration of interest. In accordance with sections 5 and 6 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, RSO 1990, CM 50, I, Jennifer Hassel, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on items 1 and 2 on the Joint Planning Committee and Built Heritage Subcommittee Agenda number 1 for the special meeting of February 5th, 2021. Item 1, receipt of public submissions on the application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And item 2, receipt of public submissions on the revision to site plan approval 1 Rideau Street. My employer, the National Capital Commission, is the neighboring landowner and an approval authority over the proposed new addition. And there is a second declaration, a declaration of interest in accordance with sections 5 and 6 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, RSO 1990 CM 50. I, Jennifer Hassel, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on item 1 of the Built Heritage Subcommittee Agenda 20 for the special meeting of February 5th, 2021. Application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. My employer, the National Capital Commission, is the neighboring landowner and an approval authority over the proposed new addition. My understanding is that Member Hassel will read these declarations of interest into the record at the next meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee when she attends. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Over the past few years, we've seen that people have strong opinions about the proposed addition. A contemporary design is clearly not everyone's cup of tea, but no major addition is likely to please everyone. Ultimately, it is a contemporary design that the owners of the chateau have opted for. That's the submission before us, and the city has an obligation to review it on its own merits. For that reason, I think it would be helpful to briefly summarize that what we're here to consider today, and more importantly, what is not up for debate. The proposed addition needs 2 approvals from the city, a heritage permit and a site plan control approval. The chateau is a designated heritage building under the Ontario Heritage Act, which means the owner needs a heritage permit before they can alter the existing building. To recommend approving that permit, we need to be convinced the addition does not compromise its heritage value, neither its landmark character, nor its architectural style. So we really need to limit our attention to aspects like whether the materials used are consistent with those on the existing building, or whether the proposed height still allows for the iconic views of the chateau that we all value, or whether there's enough distance between the addition and the historic building to allow it to read as a distinct building. In short, it's a question of whether the addition is compatible with the chateau. This is not about whether we agree that a contemporary design is the best option for the addition. That's a question for the applicant, and they already made that choice. They want a contemporary addition, and the Ontario Heritage Act and Planning Act give them the right to submit the design of their choosing. We can refuse an application, but only if there's a valid reason. Our authority ends well short of requiring the owner to submit a traditionalist design simply because a modern one is not to everybody's taste. I know some will never be happy with the modern design, but if we don't limit our decision to what's in order, any resulting appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal would undoubtedly go against the city. I ask you to keep that in mind as we deliberate. The second item before us is the site plan control application. Site plan is simply the process the city uses to ensure land development is safe and functional. We're not considering a zoning amendment here. There are no changes needed to permit a building of the size proposed. We're not approving height increases or smaller setbacks. For that reason, I don't anticipate a lot of discussion about the site plan application. Simply put, council already approved a site plan for the previous design, and the new design really does not change that approved site plan significantly, at least not at ground level where the public will interact with it. The new design and site landscaping will make a strong contribution to the public realm. It still has the same connectivity with Majors Hill Park, improving publicly accessible areas and making better pedestrian connections across the property between the market and the canal. Ultimately, this application is back before us because the owner worked with Heritage Ottawa to develop a design that they believed is more compatible with the existing building. That's what we'll focus on. City Heritage staff and Heritage Ottawa have now both weighed in on this, expressing support. With their combined expertise, I'm encouraged that the redesign does seem to do what it set out to: lessen the impact on the chateau. I'm curious to hear what the public delegations have to say, and of course, our valued heritage experts on the Built Heritage Subcommittee. Now, I'd like to invite Chair King to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair Harder, and good morning, everyone. I too am encouraged, and in particular by the collaboration between the owners and architects at the Chateau Laurier and our friends at Heritage Ottawa. It's always heartening to see when parties can build consensus, especially around a contentious file as this one has been. This is a project that has been around since well before I was elected to council. Like all of Ottawa, I followed along keenly with this saga since the first designs appeared in 2016. Since becoming chair of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, however, I have clearly needed to take a much deeper dive into the history of this file, and what a fascinating story it has been. Between new and revised designs, this is, I think, the sixth design that has come up for discussion, and not always at committee. The story has played out in social media and through city-led public consultations as well, and of course, meetings of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, Planning Committee, and Council. That's a long history, but it speaks to how prominent the site is. And more importantly, it speaks to how dear the chateau is to Ottawa residents. That affection goes a long way to justifying the time it has taken to examine the design. I'm sure the owners of the chateau would have liked to move faster in getting the addition built, but I give them credit for the patience that they've shown. I respect the effort they have put into listening and incorporating public feedback. Given their commitment to a contemporary design, it's not always easy to see how to incorporate feedback when it's coming from parties calling for a more traditional design. But I think it's fair to say that each successive design has managed to find additional ways to minimize the impact of the addition on the historic building. Each design has been a little bit more complementary to the chateau, even as it remains contemporary in style. I'm especially grateful to the work of our heritage planners. I appreciate that they have been able to so clearly articulate the ways they feel the proposed addition remains subordinate to the historic building. It's not always straightforward to see how the design respects the heritage of the hotel without detracting from it. I value staff's effort to demonstrate the ways in which the design draws inspiration from the chateau. And I look forward to their upcoming presentation to get into some of the specific examples. I think it will lead to some interesting discussion, especially with the non-councillor members of our subcommittee. I can always rely on you and your significant expertise in heritage matters to lead our conversation in interesting and sometimes unexpected directions. I do want to take this opportunity to emphasize a point that Chair Harder alluded to. It's unusual that the subcommittee has a site plan control application before us, because it's generally not within our mandate to discuss. We only consider matters under the Ontario Heritage Act and site plan control is a matter under the Heritage Act. Site plans need to be approved by staff or by the planning committee. I just remind members of the subcommittee that while we're here to hear delegations today that might refer to site plan, we need to limit our comments and questions to the heritage permit. With that on the record, I'll turn it back to Chair Harder to introduce the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair King. And with that, we'll go to the presentation. I think that Leslie Collins is going to be the lead. Leslie, are you ready?
Allison Hamlin.
Oh, hi, Allison. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Harder, Chair King, and members of Built Heritage Subcommittee and Planning Committee. My name is Allison Hamlin. I'm the file lead on the site plan application. I'm joined by my colleague, Leslie Collins, Program Manager of Heritage Planning. We are offering staff recommendations on Larco Investments' proposed rear addition to the Chateau Laurier Hotel. We will open this joint meeting with a 15-minute presentation, and we will be available for questions after the public delegations. This slide is good. Larco Investments is proposing a rear addition to the Chateau Laurier Hotel. They're proposing a new design from the versions that these committees have seen previously. Before you today is a new heritage application and a revision to the site plan approval that was given in 2019. With respect to the site plan, staff are recommending that the previously approved conditions remain the same and that Planning Committee approve the plans and studies reflecting this new architecture. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, that's good. Thank you. The Chateau Laurier Hotel is a landmark in downtown Ottawa. These are a few slides from this winter. The one on the left is from the Plaza Bridge. The one on the right is from Majors Hill Park. Next slide, please. The one on the left is from Mackenzie Avenue, and the one on the right is the front of the hotel from Rideau Street. It should be noted that the addition is at the rear and will not affect the view to the front of the hotel from Rideau Street. Next slide. So there have been several designs proposed since the first public version was released in 2016. The design has morphed from taller pavilions down to a 7-story bar building, and now to the current design, which is for 11 and 12-story pavilions. The current proposal will be discussed in greater detail by Leslie. Next slide. And I'll talk a little bit about the approvals process and how we are here with the revision today. So the 7-story design was approved in 2019. There were minor variances required as this version did not fully meet the city's zoning bylaw. In September 2019, the Committee of Adjustment granted partial approval of 2 variances that were required. Both Heritage Ottawa and Larco Investments appealed this decision. In August 2020, Heritage Ottawa and Larco Investments announced that they had reached a settlement on these minor variances with a new design. And then Larco Investments submitted the revised plans and studies to the city for our review in November of last year. Next slide. In terms of consultation on this version, staff have given notice and have undertaken public consultation beyond the usual requirements for this revision to site plan approval and the heritage permit applications. In addition to posting an on-site sign and posting the information on the city's website, city staff created a dedicated web page for the proposal and provided updates electronically. A public information session was held in January of this year. There were more people on the notification list for the previous proposal, but staff reached out to all of these individuals to ask them to reconfirm their interest. Since this application was made, over 200 people have come forward with comments or indicated that they wish to remain on the notification list. And since the agenda was published with the staff recommendations, we have received 21 letters. A summary of the consultation is included in document 7 of the staff report. Although the hotel is privately owned and the proposed addition requires municipal approvals under the Ontario Planning Act and heritage approvals under the Ontario Heritage Act, the hotel is surrounded on all sides by federal land. As a result, it will require approvals from the National Capital Commission for alterations along the Rideau Canal Terrace, for surface landscaping along Mackenzie Avenue, for subsurface works in Majors Hill Park, and the owners are also working with the NCC on construction management measures such as access, crane operations, and staging. The next slide shows the site plan. The addition is located at the rear of the existing hotel. It will replace the existing surface parking lot in the area of the now demolished parking structure. The proposed addition is outlined roughly in red, and the existing hotel's footprint is shown in gray. The addition is proposed to link to the existing hotel via a connection from the hotel's main hallway. The east pavilion of the addition will extend to the street, enclosing the forecourt area. Vehicular access to the new loading area and the underground parking garage will be from Mackenzie Avenue, and there will also continue to be access to the parking area from the existing driveway from Rideau Street. Windows and doors are proposed on all sides of the addition. A new exterior walkway is proposed along the north property line. This will enable pedestrians to move around the building on all sides. And a new semi-private courtyard is proposed between the addition and the hotel's ballroom. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff have considered this proposal and find that it conforms to the city's official plan and the central area secondary plan. It protects views of Parliament and other national symbols. The proposal is consistent with city guidelines, including the tall building design guidelines and bird safe guidelines. The hotel is permitted by the mixed use downtown zone, and staff support the required minor variances. The addition will consist of high quality materials and landscaping. There will be public realm enhancements, including improved pedestrian connections and greater animation at grade. Heritage staff also support the proposal. So in conclusion, planning staff are recommending that Planning Committee approve this application. So I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague in Heritage Planning, Leslie Collins.
Good morning, chairs and members of the committee. Thank you, Allison. The Chateau Laurier was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1978 for its architectural and historical value. It was designated as a National Historic Site by the Historic Sites and Monuments Board in 1981. And finally, in 1984, the Chateau Laurier was designated as part of the Confederation Square National Historic Site, which was designated for its value as the second most important ceremonial center of the national capital after Parliament Hill. The National Historic Site designations are commemorative in nature, but provide excellent insight into the cultural heritage value of the Chateau Laurier and its role in the larger cultural heritage landscape. The heritage recommendations are before the committee today, as alterations to properties designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act require council approval. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Chateau Laurier is designated as an excellent example of the Chateauesque style used for railway hotels across Canada, initially by the Canadian Pacific Railway and later by the Grand Trunk Railway. The building is within a dramatic setting overlooking the Ottawa Locks and adjacent to Parliament Hill, and features many architectural details typical of the style. It was constructed in two main phases. The west wing was completed in 1912 and the east wing was completed in 1929. Together, they create a U-shaped massing that provides for iconic views of the building. The history of the building and its identified heritage values and attributes are included in more detail in the staff report, and more particularly in the Statement of Significance attached as Document 5. These values and attributes form the foundation for evaluating impacts on the addition. Next slide, please. I'll now go through the elevations of the proposed addition. The East Tower, shown on this slide along Mackenzie Avenue, is 10 stories or 36.45 meters to the top of the bronze screen on the roof. This section of the proposed addition includes the garage access and loading dock off of Mackenzie. Given the irregular property line, the east facade of the addition is set forward of the east facade of the chateau, sitting 0.6 meters from the eastern property line. Next slide, please. The West Tower is 11 stories or 39.45 meters to the top of the bronze screen on the roof. It is set 13 meters away from the north wall of the chateau, linked only by a glazed link from the 3rd to the 5th stories. Next slide, please. This is the north elevation of the addition, which is what you would see when looking at the proposed addition from Majors Hill Park. The addition is comprised of 3 volumes, 2 towers of 10 and 11 stories connected at grade by a 2-story glazed link. The overall massing of the addition is asymmetrical, reflecting the picturesque character of the chateau. As can be seen in this elevation, both towers are divided into a base, middle, and top, reflecting the tripartite division of the historic chateau. The addition is proposed in with a contemporary architectural expression, but the towers are defined by masonry cladding, punctuated by window openings arranged in patterns inspired by the solid to void relationship of the historic building. Both towers are capped with a decorative bronze screen to shield rooftop mechanical and ventilation systems from view. The new addition will create a courtyard space between the glazed link and the north wall of the ballroom, which will be used to provide flexible space for events occurring in the ballroom. The proposed addition includes materials drawn from the historic building. The base and middle portions will be clad in Indiana limestone and bronze framed curtain wall. Bronze panels and fins will be used to accent the roofline. Next slide, please. These images show the details of the elevation from within the courtyard. The top image shows the south elevation of the West Tower and the glazed link which faces the north wall of the historic hotel. The middle image shows the north wall of the historic chateau, where several windows are proposed to be converted to doors to allow flow from the ballroom to the new courtyard. The exact details of which windows will be converted to doors and the materials and detailing of those doors will be determined through a conservation plan as proposed in the conditions of approval. The bottom image shows the link between the new addition and the chateau. A glazed corridor will extend from the main corridor inside the chateau and lead straight through the new addition and into Majors Hill Park. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The Chateau Laurier is an iconic building in Ottawa, both on its own and for its location within a significant setting and a significant cultural landscape, which is defined by the Ottawa River, the Rideau Canal, and includes significant design spaces such as Majors Hill Park, Nepean Point, Confederation Square, and many prominent buildings. Views to and from this landscape are not protected under the Ontario Heritage Act, but evaluating impacts of the proposed addition to the Chateau Laurier from key views is an important consideration in this application. Key views considered in evaluating the impact of the proposed addition include longer skyline type views from the Alexandra Bridge and a view taken from the Ottawa River, which is often referred to as the $1 bill view. And several key closer urban views were also considered, including the view from the National War Memorial, Majors Hill Park, the view from the statue of Colonel John By in the park, the view from Wellington Street on the Plaza Bridge, and the view from the Ottawa Locks. I'm going to go through these views quickly now and provide some analysis at the end. Next slide, please. This view shows the West Tower of the addition, taken from Wellington Street on the Plaza Bridge, overlooking the Ottawa Locks. Next slide. This is the view of the proposed addition from below at the Ottawa Locks, the Rideau Canal. Next slide, please. This is the view from the north in Majors Hill Park. The revised proposal has the greatest impact on this view, which I'll discuss a little bit later. Thank you. Similar to the previous view, this view is also from Majors Hill Park near the statue of Colonel John By. Next slide, please. Thank you. This view is looking southwest along Mackenzie Avenue towards the east tower of the addition. This view shows the proposal as seen from the National War Memorial. This view is taken from the east block of Parliament Hill, looking across the Ottawa Locks and the canal towards the chateau. This is one of the longer skyline views taken from the Ottawa River. And then the final one is similar to the previous view. This view is taken from the Alexandra Bridge. Next slide, please. As noted in the staff report, any large-scale addition to the chateau will result in some impacts on views. The current proposal minimizes negative impacts on the key urban views, particularly from Majors Hill Park, and results in some greater impacts on the skyline views from the north. Negative impacts on the significant views have been mitigated by the 2-pavilion massing of the addition, which continues the east and west wings of the historic hotel and opens up views into the center of the U-shaped historic building. The separation of the west tower from the main building allows views of the west wing of the building and its roofline. The use of a restrained architectural expression and the use of a high-quality compatible material palette mitigate impacts on the long views. Next slide, please. The standards and guidelines are a pan-Canadian document developed by Parks Canada to provide a framework for making essential decisions about character-defining elements of historic places. The standards and guidelines were adopted by City Council in 2008 to evaluate applications to alter under the Ontario Heritage Act. The relevant standards for this application are Standards 1 and 11. Next slide, please. Standard 1 is about conserving the heritage value and character-defining elements of the historic place as defined by a statement of significance. Intact character-defining elements should be retained as much as possible. This proposal meets Standard 1 as the proposed addition conserves the heritage value and has minimum impacts on the character-defining elements of the chateau. It does not remove, alter, or replace the character-defining elements. It replaces a parking garage of little architectural value and reestablishes a relationship between the hotel and Majors Hill Park. The addition is located behind the hotel, preserving the view of the front facade from Wellington Street, or Rideau Street, sorry. It also takes an approach of minimal intervention by lightly connecting the addition to the building in only 2 places at the east and west ends of the facade. Next slide, please. Standard 11 has been extensively discussed throughout the evaluation of the various design iterations for this project. Standard 11 recommends that any addition to an historic place must conserve the heritage value and character-defining elements. Further, it notes that new additions must be physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the original building. Standard 11 also acknowledges that there could be a wide range of compatible design options that meet the requirements of the standard. It calls for striking a balance between replication and pointed contrast. Part B of the standard also requires that an addition be subordinate to the historic place, which is not necessarily a question of size. A small, ill-conceived addition could have more impact than a large, well-designed addition. An addition must not impair or detract from the heritage value of the character-defining elements of the historic building. As it relates to the addition of to the Chateau Laurier, this application meets Standard 11 because the design of the addition is distinguishable and of its own time, but uses cues and inspiration from the design of the historic building, including the 2-volume massing that is sympathetic to the evolution of the chateau over time into a U-shaped building with an east and a west wing. The differing heights of the towers reflects the asymmetric roofline of the chateau. Use of a complementary and noble material palette, including the same smooth Indiana limestone as the original building. The addition has been designed to reflect the proportions of the chateau's tripartite design. The addition echoes the window-to-wall ratio of the chateau with large sections of masonry punctuated by thin vertical windows, reflecting the verticality of the chateau. The proposed addition takes an approach of minimal intervention by separating the addition from the historic building by a courtyard and limiting the connections to the historic fabric. The roofline is stepped back to allow for greater views of the roofline of the chateau. And finally, designing the loading and parking to be located inside the building improves the relationship along Mackenzie Avenue. Next slide, please. The applicable guidelines are located within section 4.3.1 of the standards and guidelines. The proposed addition is located at the rear of the building on the site of the former parking garage. This location minimizes impact on the landmark character of the Chateau Laurier and its contribution to the Confederation Square National Historic Site, which meets guideline number 13. The use of a contemporary architectural expression for the design of the addition meets guideline 14, and the use of the 2 pavilion massing, complementary material palette, and design inspiration meets guideline 15. Next slide, please. So to conclude, under the Ontario Heritage Act, staff are recommending that Built Heritage Subcommittee recommend that Planning Committee recommend that Council approve the application under the Heritage Act subject to the conditions, which I'll speak about in a moment. To delegate authority for minor design changes to the General Manager of the Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department, and to issue the heritage permit with a 4-year expiry date. The 4-year expiry date is longer than our typical expiry date, which is normally 2 years. In light of the current situation with COVID and the legal proceedings on this file, we wanted to allow for extra time. Next slide, please. Staff have proposed 3 conditions of approval. The first is the submission of material samples prior to the issuance of a building permit. This is a common condition for heritage permits and is intended to ensure that the proposed materials are appropriate and compatible with the Chateau Laurier and the surrounding cultural heritage landscape. The second condition is intended to provide additional detail regarding alterations to the historic building itself, such as the conversion of windows to doors in the ballroom. These details are better considered as the detailed design progresses. And the final condition is to ensure that the proposed lighting of the chateau and its addition are compatible with the objectives of the capital illumination plan and conserve the heritage value and attributes of the Chateau Laurier. And that's all we have for today, and happy to answer questions at the end of the public delegations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good presentation. It really was very clear, which was great. I know that Councillor Brockington has a motion. He has 2 motions actually, but they're the same, that he will be introducing at both the subcommittee and then at planning committee. Would you just like to introduce that now, and then we're going to go right to the delegations?
Yes, Madam Chair, good morning to you. Would you like me to read the entire motion and just get it on now?
Yes, read it now, and while we have the public with us. I mean, some people may not hang around.
Sure.
For both of the committees.
Okay, so colleagues, this is a technical amendment with respect to updating the cultural heritage impact statement. Whereas the report for the application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, details a rear addition of 2 towers on 10 east side and 11 west side stories connected at grade by a 2-story base to the Chateau Laurier. Whereas staff discussed the application and the cultural heritage impact statement with Parks Canada, which requested that the statement be updated to more clearly analyze potential impacts of the proposed addition on the Rideau Canal World Heritage Site. Whereas as a result of these conversations with and revisions requested by Parks Canada, the applicant's heritage consultant has revised the statement on February 2nd, 2021, after the publication of the agenda on January 26, 2021 for this special meeting. Whereas these revisions have no implications on the content of the staff report or the recommendations. Therefore, be it resolved that the cultural heritage impact statement listed as document 10 of the report for the application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, be replaced with the cultural heritage impact statement dated February 2nd, 2021 on file with the city clerk. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And so Co-Chair King, we'll start with the delegations. Did you want to introduce the first one?
Yes, and just give me a second. I will open up the speakers list here. Many things going on in this computer.
Sorry, I guess I took you by surprise there.
A
I
little
can do the
bit.
first one, and you can do the second
I
one.
just pulled it up here. So
Okay,
I believe our first speaker, according to the list, is Robin Collins.
yes. Is Robin here?
I am.
Yes. Hello. Good
Can you see
morning.
me?
Yes, we can, and we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning. I'm
Good
speaking
morning.
on,
So, sir, if you didn't, I think I said this in my very long opening remarks, but everyone has 5 minutes to speak. And we'll try to give you a heads up at 1 minute. Thanks very much.
thanks very much. I'm speaking on behalf of Protect Canada Laurier. It's a group that was formed very recently. Could I have a slide change, please? We believe the city staff reports, while acknowledging public opposition to the current addition to the Chateau Laurier, minimize or even dismiss the value of that public input. The public has repeatedly shown contempt for a neo-modernist hotel addition. By petition of nearly 14,000 people, also through a city survey of 1,700, and of all comments sent to City Council recently, fewer than 5% supported the current proposal. All the data point in the same direction. The public says do not build it. Slide change, please. The focus of city staff on the standards and guidelines. Sorry, the focus of city staff is on the standards and guidelines. And we can agree that the standards are not gospel nor mandatory. And as the reports read, there are no requirements to design an addition in a particular architectural style. However, a design that is close to being chateauesque is inherently more compatible than one that is neo-modern and radically boxy. But we also see a misuse of meaning, we believe, in reference to subordinate and compatible, but also the word distinguishable. These terms are subjective, but they are being cherry-picked to justify something that overall is inconsistent with the intent of heritage guidelines. Slide change, please. We are generally aligned with Gordon Bennett, former Director of Policy of National Historic Sites, and who played a significant role in producing the heritage standards and guidelines. He wrote this week in the Ottawa Citizen that the proposal, 1, violates subordination to the historic place, 2, has a negative impact on character-defining forms and space, and 3, fails to deliver balance between imitation and pointed contrast. This proposal, he wrote, quote, does not meet these requirements, end quote. Slide change, please. The international heritage protections principles are intended to minimize intervention while making protected buildings useful. The purpose of looking somewhat different from the original has some logic to it. It is to tell the original from the annex and to honor the original, but being very similar without being identical, and while also being compatible with heritage, can all be done at the same time. There are many Canadian historic hotels with compatible in-period additions, as that slide shows. Nonetheless, and as the Canadian international standards themselves state, quote, new additions to heritage buildings should be avoided, end quote, if at all possible. In competition with this perspective, the staff reports insist throughout, despite the evidence, that the historic and precinct views are not harmed by the architect's design. One tower's height is lower than the existing roof, we are told, here implying that views of the existing roof from ground level are not blocked, which they are. The visual impacts they claim are minimal or mitigated. In other words, they could be worse. There are views of the hotel and views from the hotel that will be ruined. Incoherently, the 2 box pavilions are said to open up the views when in fact they obstruct the U-shaped courtyard. Neo-modernism, the boxy design style, is referred to as restrained architectural expression. This is a subjective reading of the word restraint and is not shared by most of us. The federal government, we are told, is, quote, not in the hotel business, and this is, quote, privately owned land. That appears to be a political statement, not advocacy for protection of heritage property. The Chateau Laurier is currently privately owned, but it is not only privately owned. It is also a National Historic Site, and the owner, Larco promised upon purchase in 2013 that they were not going to substantially alter the structure. That promise may not have been a condition of sale, but it should have been. Very quickly, the owner started the search for a condominium architect. In our view, these staff reports are not neutral assessments, but skewed appraisals that attempt to justify an unacceptable, unliked proposal. The intentions of the standards, compatibility and subservience to the existing iconic hotel, and above all, heritage protection, are not being met by the proposal, and it should have been reflected in the heritage assessment. There is no unanimous viewpoint, but overwhelmingly, people who live in this city, in the national capital and beyond, even many of those on council, share the same perspective. No neo-modernist addition that offends the historic Chateau Hotel is acceptable. That should be stated loud and clear from here to council. Committee should recommend rejection of the proposal and those recommendations to support it. We will be asking council to take a pause, a pandemic pause, if you will, and then consider other options. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. We do have a question from Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Collins, thank you for your presentation. Council endorsed the the previous version, which many would agree was, a lesser quality than what we have before us today. So if council approved that, it's likely they're going to approve this today, or not council, but at least the committees. So in a couple sentences, summarize, what is the main issue you have with the design before us now?
I think it's fair to say that for the vast majority of the public, the current design compared to the previous design is a distinction without a difference, in essence. We and most people believe that let's use the term neo-modern design doesn't fit in character with the Chateau West styling, and much of the discussion has been about the minutia of materials, ignoring the views, ignoring the boxy conflict or contradistinction between the proposal and the original. It's almost as if nobody is speaking about, on council at least, or in committee, about the most obvious. This is like the emperor having no clothes. The most obvious is what the vast majority of people, including ourselves, say is the problem, which is that there's a conflict between the proposal and the original heritage building.
Thank you for your submission today. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Collins, Councillor Fleury has questions for you. Councillor Fleury?
Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair. Thank you for this. Mr. Collins, good morning. A lot of you and I had the chance to discuss. Can you maybe clarify, you're familiar with the city process and the review that's underway. Ultimately, you're asking for an intervention from the federal government or federal partners. Can you maybe articulate how you see that procedurally happen? Obviously, today there's a city report and it looks at the site plan and the heritage permit. That's under our review process, but can you maybe articulate what your ask is to federal agencies and federal government?
Sure. I mean, at the city level, or even at this committee level, we're asking for a pause. So in essence, a stall on the recommendation that's coming forward from staff, and in order to look at what the other options might be. Now, there's a few that had been in discussion before and are currently also in discussion. One is that we pursue intervention from the Ontario Heritage Ministry and the federal authorities, NCC and otherwise, Parks Canada, and so on, to see whether, well, I mean, one option is that a better proposal come forward, a better plan come forward. Dismissing that for the moment. Other possibilities would be a competition for a new world-class project possibly hosted by the National Capital Commission, that would solicit options, including shadow-esque style options, which have been dismissed in the past to a large degree.
Just to be clear, and I appreciate the clarity, but you're not asking the feds to expropriate the property, or you're
well,
asking
that would be worst case. Certainly, everyone recognizes this is private property, but the problem, I think, is that there's been deference to the ownership over the heritage aspect, and that priority should be reversed. We should remember that Larco purchased this building in 2013, knowing that it was heritage property, and said they were not going to change it. So, I mean, that was an attribute of the hotel that they purchased. So, I'm not sure if I answered.
Thank you for, no, I appreciate your clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat has a question as well, Mr. Collins.
Thanks. The first design that everyone hated was September of 2016. It's 4.5 years ago. Every subsequent design has been hated by the public. What do you think more time's going to do?
Well, I guess we're talking about whether 2 or 3 councillors are going to shift their vote is what we're talking about. So, I mean, a pause will stop this train from rushing through in the current climate. Allow sober second thought that 4.5 years haven't attended to. We think that the one option that was put forward was potentially that the space that was opened up with the removal of the garage could be taken over by a federal authority and leased back with extensive regulations and heritage protection embedded. So that's an option. I'm not sure that it was considered before, but that's an option that should certainly be on the table. It's a very popular position. You know, when fewer than 5% of the people responding to council say they like the current design, that should be a signal to councillors that their electors are not happy with what's going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you. I see no more hands. Thanks very much, Mr. Collins, for coming out today.
Thank you very much.
I just want to remind everybody that what's before us today, the Shadow is a designated heritage building. And to recommend approving that permit, we need to be convinced that the addition does not compromise its heritage value, neither landmark, character, nor architectural. So we really need to be limiting our attention to aspects like whether the materials used are consistent with those on the existing building, or whether the proposed height will still allows for the iconic views of the Shadow, or whether there's enough distance between the addition and the historic building to allow it to read distinctly. In short, it's a question about whether the addition is compatible with the Shadow, and it's not about whether we agree a contemporary design is the best option for the addition. That's not before us. That was a question for the applicant, and they already made that choice. So thank you. The next speaker up is Richard Beliveau from Heritage Ottawa.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking with you today. I'm Richard Beliveau, President of Heritage Ottawa, and I'm here on behalf of the organization to support the staff recommendations for this application. In 2019, Heritage Ottawa challenged the city's decision to permit construction of a widely vilified horizontal bar, which blocked the rear view of the Chateau Laurier, this wonderful National Historic Site. After the ruling of the Committee of Adjustment in September 2019, both Heritage Ottawa and the owner, Larco Investments Limited, filed appeals with the Provincial Local Planning Appeals Tribunal. The LPAT hearing was postponed due to COVID. This provided both parties the opportunity to discuss a possible settlement. LARCO presented Heritage Ottawa with a new 2-pavilion design that would extend the existing wings of the hotel, incorporating a low-rise glass connector, and so reopening the view to the rear of the rear courtyard. This proposal initiated a lengthy process of consultation and revisions leading up to the design proposal we have today. As part of that process, Heritage Ottawa consulted with internationally respected Canadian architectural and conservation experts who willingly donated their time. These were Phyllis Lambert, the founding director emeritus of the Canadian Centre for Architecture, Dr. Christina Cameron, professor emeritus of the Canadian Research Chair on Built Heritage at the University of Montreal, and past chair of the Canadian delegation to UNESCO's World Heritage Committee. Professor Liette Fortin of the Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism at Carleton University. And as he mentioned earlier, Barry Podolsky, founder of Barry Podolsky Associates. Their vast knowledge, their understanding of materials, and their wisdom with respect to melding contemporary and historic architecture proved invaluable. The proposed new addition is not a historical replica, which Heritage Ottawa never advocated, but is more compatible with the hotel's composition and irregular silhouette. In its new form, the cherished views to the rear of the hotel are exposed, preserving the openness of form by revealing the original building's U-shaped pattern and picturesque qualities from Majors Hill Park. The low-rise connector between the 2 pavilions is lower than the parking garage it replaces, and it is transparent. The preponderance of Indiana limestone cladding with copper and bronze elements in the new design is in keeping with the materials of the historic hotel, resulting in a significant improvement over the long glass-covered rectangular addition previously approved. These material changes, the opening up of views into the courtyard, and the subtle delineation of the massing of the 2 pavilions into 3 sections that align with the hotel, together form a worthy contemporary response to the National Historic Site that meets requirements set out in the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. In the end, we have a new work that meets the important guideline that it be, quote, physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. And the end of that quote. This groundbreaking change, of course, would not have been possible without the outpouring of support from the group calling itself the Friends of the Chateau Laurier, from the citizens of Ottawa, and from Canadians all across the country. Their response to the government, to the absence of government action, made it possible for Heritage Ottawa to take legal action and to arrive at a better outcome for this beloved building. The breakthrough was also enabled by the owner's willingness to consider public concerns and to work with Heritage Ottawa to revise the design in favor of a more compatible scheme that better respects the heritage character of the Chateau Laurier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I see Councillor Fleury has a question for you. Councillor Fleury?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Béliveau. I just want to clarify, so when you're making those statements, you're making the statements by the agreement that was established between LARCO and Heritage Ottawa, or is this independent of that?
We agreed that we would support the new design. That was part of the discussions we undertook, and it reflects the willingness they had to make many changes. Indeed, the original design that they offered us again to look at, it was useful in that it went back to the 2 pavilion site, but it was not an appropriate design. Over the course of several weeks, we made many suggestions with the help of our experts, and they followed up with those. So yes, we agreed at the end that we would support this.
Okay.
Madam Chair, it's Michael Polwin. If I can assist,
Well, hang on, Michael.
Yeah,
Michael, you wait, hang on a minute.
I'm not me. I'm
You're
just
up
here.
next, so I prefer
No,
that you.
Madam Chair, I'm just
Okay,
here to
just a
assist on the. I'm just here on the to help answer questions. That's all.
Okay. I
Okay.
know that's usually what you are. So, Mr. Beliveau, the next speaker is Michael Polwin, and I know I was thinking, Michael, when I called you, that you were probably going to say that you were here for questions. Mr. Beliveau, would it be helpful if Mr. Polwin helped you with this legal question?
yes, that's why we invited him here today. He speaks
All
for
right.
us on the legal issues.
All right.
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, it bears saying that the owners have not seen the statement Mr. Beliveau just delivered. It was not negotiated, but there was a general undertaking that, having signed the agreement, that Heritage Ottawa would support as needed this proposal.
Okay. No, I appreciate you clarifying that, Michael. I wanted to know if it was a written legal document that Richard was required to read here. Okay. So back to Heritage Ottawa, Mr. Beliveau, I want to thank. I know there's a number of members of the organization. I see Mr. Podolsky and Carolyn and others who've walked that journey since day one of this application. Can you maybe speak to Heritage Ottawa's involvement throughout prior to the appeal, just so just so we understand?
Yes, when the first designs were submitted, we made several comments on this. I think we even organized a little bit of a display of alternate possible designs by the students from Carleton University. So this was 2 years back. When the application for approval of the earlier design, and this was the one that eventually was approved by the City Council, what we call the radiator design, we had opposed that before Council, and following its approval by a fairly narrow vote in retrospect, we then began this campaign. We were very conscious of the outrage that had been expressed by so many of the people in Ottawa. And that is when we got together with this group who eventually called themselves the Friends of the Chateau Laurier. And we decided that, yes, we would take this campaign. We would make appeals when it came time to, when they were seeking variance for their approvals. We developed a fundraising campaign. We had an enormous fundraising campaign, which supported our legal actions. We made an appeal at the Committee of Adjustment. As was mentioned earlier, we got one favorable ruling on the 2 variances that had been applied, and lost on the other. Following which, we made the appeal to the LPAT, and this was the nature of our campaign over the course of a year and a half. Before we got to the stage of an LPAT hearing, we were approached by the other side, by LARCO, to see, if there was some sort of common ground. And we reverted to the statement that we had made to begin with when the Friends of the Chateau Laurier was there, that yes, we were not opposed to an addition. We were not opposed to a contemporary design. That was very clear. We were opposed to something that was clearly incompatible and destructive of the certainly from the rear view of the character of the Chateau Laurier. And we thought that the so-called radiator design had to be stopped. And that's what we achieved in the end. I think that we We had a very fruitful discussion with the architect, and many of the suggestions that we made were accepted. We had the best experts in the world. I named, or in Canada for sure, that I discussed there. They were part of our negotiations with Larco. And by the way, Councillor Fleury, if I may say so, I think it was your leadership as well that encouraged us to undertake this campaign, and we thank you very much for it.
Well, I didn't expect that, but thank you, Mr. Bilvaux. Merci, Madam Chair, for allowing Mr. Bilvaux to explain the process that Heritage Ottawa has been involved throughout. So I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. And so just remind everyone before we go to Ms. Quinn, who has got her hand up, that Michael is here as the lawyer for Heritage Ottawa, and any questions you have from a legal perspective to Mr. Beliveau, Michael will be chiming in on. So Carolyn Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, Mr. Beliveau, just harkens back to what we heard from Mr. Collins prior to your presentation. And this was with respect to a role for the federal government in this issue. And I'm wondering if you could share with the committees what role or what effort Heritage Ottawa made to approach federal government ministers or representatives about whether there was a role or a step that the federal government could take in this issue.
Oh, very early in the campaign, we contacted the local members of parliament, including Minister McKenna, who is a representative for Centretown for part of the area there. We spoke with the NCC, we spoke with other people. There was no appetite on the part of the federal government to become involved with this project. In fact, what I would say now is that if the federal government really were to be, if people would like something to happen on behalf of the federal government, would be to provide the proper legal protection for national historic sites. It's one thing to name a national historic site, but there is no legal, no strong legal legislation. Sorry, there's no strong legislation to protect historic monuments in this country. And I think that's what we really need now, rather than intervention on a specific project.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for questions. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming out today. So next up, we have the applicant. And speaking for the applicant is Dennis Jacobs. With Dennis is a whole bunch of people for questions. So Dennis is going to introduce it, but he has Art Phillips, Peter Clues, Rob Cadeau, Michael McClellan, and Emma Blanchard. So I'm putting it into your hands, Dennis. Where are you? Is Dennis here?
There I am. Hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Oh, I see you. Hi.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Chair. You did identify the people that are with me that we're here to answer questions. Art Phillips represents the owner. Peter Clues and Rob Cadeau are the project architects. Michael McClellan is our heritage architect, and Emma Blanchard has been assisting on the legal side of this project. I just wanted to say that we're very pleased to be in front of committee again with this revised design. It's a very important addition to keep the Fairmont Chateau Laurier current and moving forward in a very competitive hotel market. So we're pleased that we were able to have this joint meeting to have expedite things and also allow for the additional consultation. We certainly support the the applications that and the reports that were provided by city staff, and we're here to answer any questions that the committee members may have. And if you present the question, I'll help kind of steer it towards the correct person to answer that question.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Dennis. I see first up is Councillor Brockington, who's on one of the two committees. Councillor Brockington, followed by Councillor Fleury.
Chair, I was just
Questions of
wondering.
the applicant?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the local councillor wanted to go first.
Do you, Councillor Fleury?
It doesn't matter. I do have technical questions on process for Mr. Jacobs. That's I don't know if that's helpful to you, Councillor Brockington, but I'm glad to be
He's
first or
made
second.
the offer, so it's up to you. Go first.
Sure,
or
I'll
go
take it. I'll
second.
take it. I don't mind asking
Okay.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Dennis. Just in turn, I just want to clarify. So in front of us now we have the site plan component and the heritage permit. The heritage permit will make its way for council's consideration, as highlighted by the chair. Last go around, LARCO or the applicant had to go to a committee of adjustment. So can you clarify the process? Oh, I lost you here. Oh, sorry, here you are.
I'm still here.
The screen shuffled on me here. So yeah, last time around you had a number of follow-up approvals with the National Capital Commission, with the Committee of Adjustment. Can you maybe just walk committee and council through the process for you?
Certainly, Councillor. With respect to the National Capital Commission, we have been in discussions with them in parallel with city staff. We've had several meetings with them. We have made a submission to their ACMADAR, their urban design panel, and we are anticipating being on an agenda for review by that committee on February 25th or 26th of this month. And that would be dealing with what's considered to be a level 3 federal land use approval. We will get recommendations from them, and that whatever comes from that meeting will rise to the board of directors for a meeting, I believe, which will be in April. We are also dealing directly with staff on what are called federal land use approval level 2, which deals with easements, the need to provide an easement underground into the park to connect up servicing, as well as under Mackenzie to connect up servicing. It all goes through lands that they own, as well as some works on the terrace that require their approvals from a staff level. We are continuing to work with staff at the NCC with respect to how they're reimagining Majors Hill Park to ensure that what we're doing complements and works with their studies as it goes forward. With respect to the Committee of Adjustment, with the last approval, there were 2 minor variances that were required. One was granted by the committee, one was not, and that resulted in the appeals that Heritage Ottawa spokesperson mentioned already. We have yet to go to a hearing on that, and our intention is, following the decisions made by City Council and Planning Committee, we would proceed with filing a submission to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, and that would outline the change from the original application. As committee members may know, once an appeal has been filed to a Committee of Adjustment matter, the entire matter rises to LPAT for a completely new hearing on all of the issues, so that they would be holding and reevaluating all of the things that were before the original Committee of Adjustment, and can make a decision based on that application as well as the revisions that we will identify to them in this submission. With respect to the minor variances themselves, the one which was granted originally by the Committee of Adjustment deals with a retaining wall that runs along the edge of the pathway link between Mackenzie and the lower terrace. That remains exactly the same as in the original application. The second one dealt with the cantilevering of the western end of what was then the bar building to allow it to project right to the property line. The bylaw requires a 3-meter setback. In this new design, there is still that same projection as it relates to the western pavilion. So the amendment or the variance is slightly altered in some dimensions, but as far as the intent and scope, it's essentially the same as was before the original Committee of Adjustment. So we will be making our case to the LPAT, and a hearing will be convened, and we'll provide our evidence with respect to those and seek a decision on the applications from LPAT. I think that summarizes the appeals or the steps that will follow City Council.
No, I appreciate you clarifying that. Just a quick follow-up. So as part of the NCC review, is there an interface with Parks Canada, or the only interface with Parks Canada is what they've submitted to us as part of city staff's heritage permit analysis?
I'm not as familiar with the NCC circulation process.
Councillor Fleury, when we
Yes,
get into our separate committees and we're asking questions of staff, that's a good question to ask them.
Okay.
Leslie or Allison, okay?
And okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that. I will have questions on appeal rights for COA and obviously Parks Canada, so I'll get back when that's appropriate.
Well, okay, but do you have any more questions for the applicant in the joint
I don't
session?
believe so. I don't believe so. I just wanted to clarify the technical elements if or when the report's reviewed by council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockington?
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mr. Jacobs, for appearing this morning. I have 2 questions. I'm just going to ask them at once, blend them together. First is, can you just remind the committee the owner's vision has always been, it seems, a design that is modern in nature. He appears to be, entrenched in the style that we've seen over the last few versions. And I want to compare that against the public sentiment, which has more or less been strongly in favor of a design or expansion that better blends with the existing architecture. Can you just comment on why the versions continue to be quite opposite to what the public sentiment? There seems to be unanimous support on council to support an expansion of this hotel. I haven't heard any member of council say we're opposed to facilitating the expansion of the Chateau. What there's disagreement on is the style or design of that expansion. So talk to me about the vision of your owner.
Well, I could certainly do that, but I think that's better addressed if I believe Peter Clues is on the line. He and Rob Cadeau have been providing the vision with respect to the architecture, so I think that question should be answered by him.
Sure, I'm very happy to pick that question up. Thanks, Dennis. Peter Clues here. I got my video off only because I'm in a rural setting and I'm having problems with my bandwidth, so I apologize for that. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. This has been a long, it's a difficult question to ask succinctly. This has been a long process starting in 2016. We've gone through a number of iterations, as been summarized by staff's presentations today. And it really, what is before you is a consensus of opinion on the part of a lot of people. So whereas the public are one group of stakeholders and an important group of stakeholders, there are many others as well. And what we've tried to do as architects is try to build a scheme and respond to all of the various commentaries that we've received over the last 4 or 5 years. And I really believe that what we have here today is a scheme that is better for that process and that more effectively, more appropriately responds to how to build a building, or an addition rather, adjacent to a National Historic Site. And so I appreciate in the public realm, it's like, well, why don't we come up with a design that the public likes? It's not as simple as that. You know, it's in our world, it is a lot of stakeholders, and this is where we are today. And as I said at the outset, I think it is a design that is better for the process that it's gone through. I don't know if that really properly answers your question, but it's not our opinion. You know, we're not dealing with here my ego as an architect and as a modernist, and this is the way it shall be. This was a really very, very fulsome and engaged process.
Appreciate that. I just wanted to underscore there continues to be a strong difference of opinion. I'm not calling into question at all your professional expertise. I just want to make sure you're aware, and I know you are, that even the 6th version is not widely embraced by the public. But thank you for the opportunity to dialogue.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't see any more questions. No hands are raised, so I thank you for that. And that is the end of our delegations. So, as I told you before, thank you for coming out, Dennis, with everyone. As I told you before, Councillor King and I are going to adjourn this joint session, and then he's going to call to order his Built Heritage Subcommittee. And then I did say that we were going to wait 15 minutes until we connected the planning committee, but I'm just going to look at everyone's face on planning committee and suggest that we just go right into planning committee when Built Heritage Subcommittee is finished their heritage work, permit work. I see thumbs up. There you go. Okay. Then that's what we're going to do. We'll go right from one to the other. Take it away, Chair King, for adjournment of this meeting and begin a commencement of your meeting.
Absolutely. On adjournment of our joint special meeting.
Carried.
Carried.
First, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge that the City of Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe land. The people of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and the land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations people, Inuit and Métis peoples, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Starting with the agenda, first on the agenda is regrets. I have received regrets from members.
Chair, if I may, could I ask for brief indulgence of the committee while we restart the stream for public viewing?
Sure.
Thank you.
We're all set. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Can you clarify? So at this point, the committee will be reviewing and the heritage permit and the site plan, and then going forward to planning will only be the heritage permit. Is that?
The heritage permit, and usually that rises to council ultimately. I believe that the site plan component, and the other planning components will be completely followed up by planning. So my understanding is we are just strictly dealing with the heritage permit per our terms of reference for this committee.
That's correct. And then Councillor Fleury will take the recommendation from the Built Heritage Subcommittee and have both the heritage permit and the site plan before the planning committee. Then that decision will go to council on the 24th.
Merci, appreciate it.
Are you ready, Mr. Eric Pilo?
Chair, yes, we're live.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So I'll just resume with regrets. I have received regrets from Member Hassel. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they are called.
Member Halsell, Member Podolsky.
Present.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Member Conforti.
Present.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Vice Chair Quinn.
Present.
Chair King.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much. The next item is declarations of interest. Member Hassel's declaration of interest was read into the record at this morning's joint planning committee meeting and Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting. Are there any other declarations of interest? And I do see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I consulted with the Integrity Commissioner because I did participate in the negotiated settlement between Heritage Ottawa and LARCO, and I also supported it at Heritage Ottawa. The Integrity Commissioner declared there was no conflict of interest. However, I have decided to abstain from voting just to make sure that there's no perception otherwise. So I will be moved to attendee status should there be at the time of voting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Quinn. I also see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Thank you, Chair King. As I declared at the joint committee between the Built Heritage Subcommittee and Planning Committee, I do not have a conflict of interest, but because transparency is really fundamental to the public trust, I just wanted to declare that since the Ottawa City Council approval in June 2019 of the former LARCO design proposal, popularly known as the radiator scheme, I was actively involved in the public campaign to challenge the approved design. I was also involved in assisting Heritage Ottawa in its negotiations with LARCO to abandon the approved design and prepare the revised design version 6 that is in front of the committee today. As the former vice chair of the Built Heritage Subcommittee during the previous tenure of City Council, I really look forward to today's presentation. Thank you very much for the chance to make this clarification.
Thank you, Member Podolsky. Seeing no other raised hands, we can proceed to the main business, planning infrastructure and economic development right-of-way, heritage and urban design services. The major item on this meeting's agenda is an application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. As noted earlier today, there is a technical amendment to replace the cultural heritage impact statement. Would Councillor Brockington please move that motion?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, during our joint meeting that preceded this one, I read a motion with respect to updating the cultural heritage impact statement. In the interest of time, I will read the therefore clause. Therefore, be it resolved that the cultural heritage impact statement listed as document 10 of the report for the application to alter the Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, be replaced with the cultural heritage impact statement dated February 2nd, 2021 on file with the city clerk.
Now, thank you, Councillor Brockington. Now, the subcommittee can wait till the end of the discussion to carry the amendment or opt to carry it now. Does the subcommittee opt to carry that that motion now?
Yes, carried.
Yes.
Carried.
Carried.
As the committee has already received the public submissions on this matter, we will now proceed with questions to staff. A reminder to members to limit comments and questions to the heritage permit matter that is before us. Does the committee have any questions for our heritage staff? And I do see Councillor Brockington with his virtual hand raised.
Thanks, Chair. I want to go through 4 components with staff on this item: the materials to be used, the height, the distance from the current hotel, and the compatibility. I don't have a big speech to make on these 4. I want to give staff the opportunity. They've already touched upon this, some of it in their presentation, but the materials to be used, height, the proposed height, the distance, and overall compatibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I mentioned in the presentation, I think I went through most of these items, but I'll go through them again just to be clear. So the proposed materials to be used for the addition, it is proposed to be clad in an smooth Indiana limestone, similar to the limestone used on the cladding of the Chateau Laurier. The roof line will be accented in bronze, and the windows will be a bronze frame curtain wall. So picking up on the characteristic materials used on the chateau. The height of the addition, there was an error on one of our slides that we noticed after the fact. They will be in fact 10 and 11 stories. So the east pavilion will be 10 stories or about 36 meters. And the west pavilion will be 11 stories or about 39 meters. And on the slide, it said 11 and 12 stories. So that was an error on our part. The distance from the existing building, this is one of the key pieces from the staff perspective. The west pavilion has been set back from the north end of the west wing by about 13 meters, and it's linked only by a 2-story glass glazed link from the 3rd to the 5th stories of the property. And then in terms of compatibility, I think that goes to the comments I made regarding standard 11 of the standards and guidelines, which requires compatibility, visual and physical compatibility, as well as subordination. And so in staff's opinion, the varying heights of the 2 towers is compatible with the asymmetrical roofline of the chateau, as well as the massing, which continues the east and west wing of the chateau as a U-shaped building. The lower connector between the 2 pavilions allows for views of the rear of the chateau from the north. And then the use of compatible architecture or compatible material palette, a complementary material palette, as well as a restrained architectural expression, all assist in increasing the compatibility of the addition with the historic building. This is outlined in the staff report and in further detail in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement prepared by ERA Architects. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Certainly, I'm not pushing back on material, height, distance. I think I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the owner's representative earlier, and that is the disconnect between what the public believes is compatible versus staff's professional opinion and that of the owner. And I don't know how much leeway you have as staff to dance. You know, you have to respond to the proposal before you, not entertain any other option, right? It's what they present, what the owner presents. You screen and assess that based on the professional and the planning criteria that you have. It's just hard for the public to accept a design that they don't believe, and which I still believe is not compatible with the existing building. And maybe we're arguing about terminology, But have there been modifications? Yes. Is it better? That's to be debated. But we don't have a huge warm public embrace of this design. And that's what's been very difficult for me. Public don't get to decide, but their input is critically important. People of Ottawa have to live with this and see this. So if you have any further comment, that would be helpful.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I think you have, I think the councillor has summed it up in that staff's role in this is to assess what is presented to us against the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. I think what you've seen from the submissions received today and from the staff opinion is that there are a range of professional opinions on this. The standards and guidelines are not prescriptive. They do not dictate an architectural style. This is private property, so it has. We are assessing this application on its own merits against the standards and guidelines. So, in staff's opinion, for the reasons I outlined, we believe that this is compatible with Standard 11 and meets those requirements, which is why we're recommending approval of the application.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. And I do see that Councillor McKinney has their hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, staff. I really only have one question. Again, I know that this has been a long and arduous road, especially for staff. I understand your position and thank Councillor Brockington for kind of articulating that in this public meeting, because I think it's important that the public understand what your role is in the confines of that, in terms of the standards and guidelines that you have to put up against this proposal. It would seem to me that the key change in this proposal is the proposed materials that are being used. And I just wonder how, we had another version application presented to us that did not have these materials, and yet it was recommended for approval. Today, what seems to have changed is the proposed materials, and that is being used as maybe I'm being unfair, and you can correct me certainly if I am, but that seems to be what's being used as the main reason for approval of this version. Could you just comment on that?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the standards and guidelines do recognize that there are a range of design solutions to meet any problem, and that anything, in addition to an historic building, there's not one appropriate solution. So staff recommended approval of the previous version of this proposal, and we stand by that approval. We think this proposal is also compatible. So yes, the materials are one reason that we have assessed this as being compatible with the Chateau Laurier. There are other reasons, including the massing. And again, I think that speaks to the fact that there are a range of options. So while the previous version was lower, which allowed for views of the roof line, this version allows for views of the rear of the building. And I think, as I said in the presentation, the view piece is interesting because any addition to this building that is of any substantial size will have some impact on some of the views. And so I think the goal has always been, from a staff perspective, is ensuring that those impacts are mitigated. And so I wouldn't say that this version is better or worse than the previous version. I would say that it also meets the standards and guidelines.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just one quick question on detail on site plan. There's a line of trees just to the north of the boundary of this expansion. Are they slated for removal, or are they going to be retained?
Thank you for the question. All of the trees that are located within Majorsville Park will be retained.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Were there any more questions for staff? And these are questions for staff. We'll allow for people to make a comment after as well. I see that Councillor Fleury has raised his hand for questions to staff.
Thank you, Councillor King. I'll my comments, I assume most members will carry through planning. I'll hold my comments till planning committee on the matter. So my questions to staff relate to, so there was a motion, a technical motion that was brought forward, and in my understanding is it refers to Parks Canada's latest interaction, which would have come in on February 2nd. Could staff comment on what Parks Canada has submitted, what's changed, and what's the expectation from the latest submission?
Thank you for the question. So the technical amendment is related to a revision to the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement that was prepared by ERA Architects in response to comments received from Parks Canada on January the 19th. So the city received a letter from Parks Canada that is attached as document 12 to the Heritage Staff Report that outlines that they believe that this proposal better meets the standards and guidelines. And also they have advised that they would like to see the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement revised to ensure that the visual impacts of the proposed addition from the Ottawa locks have been clearly articulated. We held a meeting with the applicant and Parks Canada last week and had a discussion about this issue. Following that meeting, Parks Canada provided us with an email with some recommended revisions to the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. And those revisions were incorporated by the applicant, and a revised Cultural Heritage Impact Statement was provided to staff and to Parks Canada on February the 2nd. Parks Canada has acknowledged receipt of the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. They have advised us that they were not able to get us formal comment in time for today's meeting, but that we will continue to work with them to ensure that the concerns regarding the visual impact on the canal are addressed. The revisions to the CHIS, I believe, were circulated by the committee coordinator. There is an excerpt of about 5 pages that shows the revisions in pink font so that you don't have to comb through the entire document to find them. And they are specifically related to impacts on the canal, the lock office, the commissariat building, and the Ottawa locks themselves.
Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you for clarifying. So I'm not familiar with that process. So Parks Canada submitted, there's a number of elements that required a change to the Cultural Heritage Statement. And then one of your last comments was, we'll work with them on their concerns on the canal views. Can you maybe be a little more specific on what that means? Like process-wise, you have a report in front of committee with drawings, with pretty prescriptive elements in terms of materials and shapes and so on. What does that mean from we'll work with Parks Canada with that context?
Thank you. And yes, to clarify, I should say that they have not expressed concerns about the impact on the canal. They've expressed comments related to being clear in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement as a record of the visual impacts and a record of the mitigation strategies that have been undertaken. So the revisions to the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement proposed by Parks Canada and implemented by the applicant do not impact the staff recommendations or the report in any way. It is a Cultural Heritage Impact Statement is meant to be an iterative document. It is never meant to be static. It can evolve over time. And so if you review the revisions to the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement, they are largely points of clarification as opposed to changes to the content.
Okay, I appreciate that. There's a number of elements that were negotiated and are in front of us. I tend to agree with element or concerns that Councillor Brockington was raising in terms of the contemporary aspects and some of the priority to the linear lines that were provided, and obviously can appreciate the amount and the effort that that Heritage Ottawa and their team have put to get the applicant to work with them on. But I'm curious specifically for the height component. One of the criteria is really says needs to be subordinate to, and with this increase in height, the roof line is much higher than what was previously presented. So can you maybe speak specifically to that element? So sure, there's a separation between the two buildings. Sure, there's a change in material, and we can debate over time with the architectural styles that are presented. But I'm curious about Heritage staff's perspective on the additional height of the submission.
Thank you for the question. Standard 11, which speaks about subordination, it also refers to the fact in the explanation of Standard 11, it talks about the fact that subordination is not only a question of size, so that a small, inappropriately designed addition could have more of a negative impact on a historic place than a large, properly designed addition. So in staff's mind, the additional height proposed for this addition is compatible with the Chateau Laurier because of the way that it has been allocated. So the Chateau Laurier evolved over time to become a U-shaped building, and the use of two towers at either end of the east and west wings is appropriate in terms of maintaining the massing of the building. The additional height, the roof lines have been stepped back in order to reflect the steeply pitched copper roofs of the chateau. And particularly on the West Pavilion, the separation from the chateau provides continued views of the chateau's roof line from say Parliament Hill or from the Ottawa Locks.
Okay, I have two more questions. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's appropriate. I had a legal question relating to the COA appeals. So I don't know if it's best addressed at planning or at Built Heritage.
Assuming that would be best addressed at planning.
Okay. So I guess my final question then really relates to if we were, and I think Councillor Brockington was asking that and if I'm twisting your words, Councillor Brockington, feel free to clarify, but if we had an architect that wanted to do a similar addition to what we've seen to, for example, the Lord Elgin or many of the Fairmonts, Chateau Frontenac and the Banff and so on that the community have raised throughout the submissions, how would that have been received by the city? I sort of see two processes, one which is the standard and guidelines from Parks Canada, but the other one is generally from a heritage point of view at the city in terms of your considerations. Can you maybe speak if the applicant did provide a match or something very similar to what is existing of the shadow, as you can see behind my, I guess it'd be my left shoulder here.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my presentation, the standards and guidelines are not prescriptive. They do provide for a range of design solutions. Standard 11 in particular calls for striking a balance between replication and pointed contrast. So as Councillor Brockington acknowledged earlier, staff's role is to react to what's before them. So if somebody had proposed an addition that was more historicist, let's say, or more in keeping with the existing design, staff would evaluate it against the standards and guidelines, providing that that proposal was still distinguishable from, subordinate to, and physically and visually compatible with, it could also be approved.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Brockington, I used your name there, so I don't want you to Are you comfortable with the assumption I've made?
I'm not intervening. Everything's good.
Okay. I don't want to put you in a particular spot. I just thought your line of questioning was in line with my thoughts. So appreciate that. Thank you. That will be all for me, Councillor King. I think my comments in the report state the very similar concerns that I raised under the previous application. I will speak to the broader matter and the involvement in Heritage Ottawa and process at Planning Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Fleury. We do appreciate your input and comment and questions as the ward councillor. So we appreciate you being here to provide that. I was wondering if members have any other questions to staff. If not, do members have any general comments on this item, the heritage permit in front of us? And I do see that that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand. And I think you have to unmute Vice Chair Quinn.
Thank you for that. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all of the work that has gone into this file over the past 4 years by members of staff, by volunteers at Heritage Ottawa, the Friends of the Chateau Laurier, and by the owner, Larco Investments. And I'd like to thank the people who took the time to write and present to the joint committees today. This has been a very challenging and contentious issue that has galvanized people in Ottawa to take action like nothing I've experienced in my time on this committee. But what we have before us today is a carefully designed proposal that addresses the concerns expressed by this committee about the previous 2019 bar building addition. Much has been said about the proposed design this morning, so I'd like to direct my comments to what important lessons for our national capital we have hopefully learned from this experience. One of the most important lessons has been the demonstrable need for federal legislation in this country that protects buildings and sites that the federal government has been designating as National Historic Sites of Canada since 1919. Canada is the only G7 country that does not have protection in law for its National Historic Sites, with the exception of those placed under Parks Canada's jurisdiction. In the case of the Chateau Laurier, there has been a lack of clarity and leadership from either Parks Canada or the NCC on a number of fronts. At the municipal level, where this has landed, other lessons have been learned. Evidence of the limitations in the municipal process come into focus when it falls upon a local community group supported by hundreds of people to challenge the previous design all the way to LPAT before we can have this new, in my view, much improved design brought forward. I participated in that process and was hugely impressed by the many individuals who freely gave their time and worked collectively and collegially over many months, letting go of personal preferences for the greater good. This is a time for reflection on lessons learned and considerations on how we can achieve these kinds of results without them having to be the result from having resulted from litigation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. And I believe that Member Conforti raised her hand next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to start off similarly to Vice Chair Quinn and just congratulate and commend the joint effort from Heritage Ottawa and the owners, Larco Investment. Their collaboration and their sort of willingness to work together and sort of meet in the middle, if you will, is admirable. And I think it has led to a better design. And of course, I'd like to also congratulate staff who have poured an immense amount of time into this file. So I think your work and your presentation today has been very helpful. I also want to mention that I did carefully read all of the letters that came in from citizen delegations. And I appreciate all the points that were brought up in these letters. In large part, it was the citizens of Ottawa that really pushed for this design to develop and improve. So I think that this that this case file is a really good example of how the public does care about the public realm, and they do care about what our city looks like. And I remember, thinking back to 2009's subcommittee meeting, a lot of the citizen delegations prefaced their comments by saying, well, I'm not an architect, but, and I don't think they needed to qualify their comments. I think their comments were very astute and very valid. And I think whoever's been involved, there's been hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people that have been involved and interested in this project. And I think that's really good. And that's a really sort of healthy demonstration of democracy. So that's another point I wanted to bring up. The next point I wanted to mention was, and this has been alluded to in this meeting this morning, but by other speakers, but it's this sort of subjectivity of the standards and guidelines. And I do want to just make a point that this isn't really a matter of this isn't a matter of personal opinion. It doesn't, I won't be sharing whether I think this design is good or bad. I don't think it's about that. Our role as sort of public members of this committee and heritage subject matter experts is to look at what's in front of us and evaluate it based on the guidelines, the standards and guidelines, with some form of impartiality, which is not always easy to do. But I think that Leslie did a really good job today of explaining that there are many, many architectural responses that can meet the standards and guidelines. In particular, Standard 11 has been spoken about, many, many times and in many different ways. And it's true that you do have to evaluate whether this design has met Standard 11, and it can be subjective. It is subjective, but in many ways you have to sort of put design style and personal preferences aside and to be able to say, is this subordinate to the original building? Is it compatible with? And there are different measures to do that. So to provide some context, I was appointed to this committee in 2019, and the meeting in June of 2019, I think, was my second meeting. So I wasn't involved in the process before that. And what was presented to us that day, we weren't voting for the heritage permit. It was already granted upon 3 conditions, though. And what we were allowed to comment on that day was whether the 2019 design met those 3 conditions. And I did have an issue with 2 of them. I didn't believe that the 2019 met 2 of those conditions that were placed on the previously approved heritage permit, and that was the north facade, which it was asked that the sort of monolithic form or massing of that north facade be broken up. And I didn't think it went far enough. There were a few sort of 1 or 2 meter setbacks that sort of broke it up on a very surface level, but I didn't feel that it met that condition. The other one was to draw proportions and details, patterns from the original building and draw those into the new addition. I also didn't feel at that time that condition was met. I found the sort of the relationship between the new addition and the original Chateau Laurier was not intuitive. Even some of the datum lines that the design sort of, or the architects were explaining were trying to meet the original Chateau Laurier. I didn't really see that, and I didn't agree that there was sort of a harmony between the two. What we have in front of us today, I do believe addresses those concerns, the original concerns I had in 2019, mainly by breaking up the form and the massing of the addition into the pavilion shapes and continuing sort of the U shape of the original Chateau Laurier. The views are greatly improved, in particular the view from Majors Hill Park. So you do have views into the center, into the courtyard, into the rear side of the original Chateau Laurier. Yes, you lose some views of the roof line, but as Leslie mentioned, we are always going to lose and have impacts on the views. The design as it's presented today, I do think achieves or has a lesser impact on the views from what we've seen previously. And I think one more thing I wanted to, I think also the sort of the iteration of base, middle, and top is also much more successful in this design. It's much more intuitive and much more apparent when you look at the building that it sort of mirrors the original building, that tripartite sort of composition of the original. I also wanted to mention, I know one of the speakers alluded to this in his remarks today. This building does have a history of alterations and additions. And I think he even presented a picture of that. You know, that the west portion was built in 1912, and then the east portion was built in 1929. And there are subtle differences there, so you can differentiate them. But overall, they're built in the same style. And I think it's very important to note that there was only 17 years between those two additions. So architectural styles did not change considerably in that amount of time. So it was appropriate at that time to be very similar to the original portion of the building. We're now talking, 100 years later, and it is very important, even in a heritage context, even in the context of a National Historic Site, to design something that says something about the time that we're living in and the construction methods and even the styles that are contemporary. Again, it's not about personal opinion. It's not about whether I like this new design or not. But I do strongly feel that we as architects do need to design and build projects that say something about the year that we are in. So recognizing that it has been almost 100 years since the last edition.
And so Member Conforti, I know that you've exceeded a bit of your time, so I'll just let you wrap up. Sorry about
Thank you. Actually, that was actually my last point. So thank you. I know I had a lot to say, but.
And just appreciating that planning is going to go right after us. But thank you so much for your statement. And I see that Member Podolsky has his hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair King and members of the committee and the public that is watching the live stream of these meetings. I will be brief, but I will be taking up a broader view of what has happened over the last 4.5 years on the Chateau Laurier controversy. I think that, first of all, quite up front, I would like to say that in my view, the proposed design that is in front of the Built Heritage Subcommittee today is not a great piece of architecture, and it is not one that will be a destination for tourists when they decide to travel again. It's not going to be a internationally acclaimed destination, a must-see. Also, I think in terms of the process and the roles of government on this file, we have not covered ourselves with glory. I think that the response to the proposed addition by the authorities having jurisdiction, the NCC, the City of Ottawa, Parks Canada, have shown the inadequacy of these authorities to protect and enhance the character of the core of Canada's capital. We have, in some ways, failed to do this. Now, having said that, I'm going to support the staff recommendation to approve this application for very, very specific and pragmatic reasons. The previous design, which others have referred to, the so-called radiator, really that was approved by the City Council, would have been an architectural eyesore and an embarrassment to the pride of the national capital. I think that, in my view, let's be subjective here, it would have been an F in terms of its ranking. The current design that we have in front of us is not an A+, an A, or even a B, to use school ranking language. It's probably in the C minus, C plus ranking, which means that it's a pass, but just barely. There is I'm going to hesitate here for just a moment. I think that the important thing from here on in is that I think that both the city, the NCC, and Parks Canada, together with Heritage Ottawa and other participants, should initiate a kind of inquiry, a kind of post-mortem on this file to really learn lessons from it that can be of benefit to others in Canada that are facing alterations or interventions to their beloved heritage architecture. I think that questions will need to be asked, like, why did the National Capital Commission abdicate its duty in 2017 to review and approve the design, leaving it to the City of Ottawa, in whose hands evaluating projects that deal with the federal identity and federal landscape are outside of its experience. Other questions like, why did the National Capital Commission not negotiate some minor land exchanges with Larco Development to allow an expansion of the Chateau Laurier on the Mackenzie King side, allowing for it to achieve its objectives of expanding, but at the same time protecting the views from the canal and the Majors Hill Park. This would have been something that would have been quite easy to do, but wasn't done. Then, notwithstanding the thousands of words in the staff reports and the cultural heritage impact statement that was produced that rationalized each design that was submitted, sometimes, I'll be blunt, verging on sophism, I think that we need to ask ourselves, what is the principles behind standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada? What is the objective of the core of the capital NCC plans? And what does compatibility really mean? What do we mean by styles? Is there a case for compatible design, such as the one that Ottawa City Council approved in the year 2000 for the Chateau Laurier expansion? So a number of questions need to be asked, because what we don't want to do looking forward is to continue to struggle and repeat the errors and experience the anxieties that we have on the Chateau Laurier edition file. So Chair King, with those few remarks, I really would like to hear what others have to say and look forward to the recommendation for approval of this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Podolsky, and Councillor Brockington has raised his hand as well for comments.
Thank you, Chair. I raised my hand because I want to ask Mr. Tim Mark a question, but first I'm just going to comment on Mr. Podolsky's comment on his comments. My frustration living in our great city is that we accept a C grade. That's okay. C grade, it's a pass. We're okay with that. That outside the parliamentary precinct in this city, having worked at Tiny's Pasture, which is an architectural abyss, ugly, having as a young kid going to Carleton University as my dad finished his degree going swimming, and even at a young age thinking to myself, these buildings are ugly. Why do we accept this? Having sat on planning for 6 years and looking at the designs of the various developments that have come to us, never been impressed. Can probably count on one finger or one hand when the architectural quality of what we were looking at was impressive. It's just bland, just another building we put up. People have the right not to be happy with what is being proposed for the Chateau Laurier expansion. I'm not. And some of us can use very rigid criteria to say it's better. It meets standards. I'm gonna vote in favor. I'm not. This is my opportunity to say this is not acceptable and it's not good enough. And many of us are already acknowledging that it's not good enough. So this is my opportunity to vote. And I'm not going to be bound by rigid criteria because it's not good enough. And this is my opportunity as an elected member to exercise that right, and I will. Now, my question is to Mark, which is different, is something that Vice Chair Quinn said, which I just want to pursue further, and that is, given the National Historic Site status and her plea that the federal government be more engaged, that they have a responsibility. If they're going to make this a national historical site, why are they not more engaged? So the question is there any opportunity for this subcommittee through planning committee, through ultimately council, make a request of the federal government to consider basically amending or improving opportunities of the feds to get engaged and involved in a process like this when a national historical site is to be modified, that they have a greater role and responsibility to be engaged. I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Mr. Chair, it occurs to me that there are at least two means by which that could be achieved. Not today, Mr. Chair, but moving forward. One would be to post an inquiry at the end of today's meeting, by which you would ask staff to come back with a report on the issue. The second, and you would not be able to do it today because it's a special meeting, but at the next meeting of Build Heritage, you could put in a notice of motion that would invite the federal government to take action in that area. So an inquiry could be made today, or a notice of motion could be given at the next meeting of the Build Heritage Subcommittee, Mr. Chair.
Good. I'm going to file an inquiry. I'm not going to do it today because I want to get the wording right and I want to work with staff on the wording. But I do believe this is something we need to consider and consider options. So Mr. Mark, I appreciate that advice, and I'm likely to submit a public inquiry when this comes to council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. And I do see that Councillor Fleury raised his hand. I don't know, maybe in response to some of your comments, Councillor Brockington.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor Brockington. I've been working with Councillor McKinney on bringing forward a motion to council with regards to legal protection for national sites. So glad to work with you on that. And then I think we should take away as well the latest request from Member Podolsky relating to conducting a lessons learned exercise at the city about this review. So let's take it offline and re-raise it with the appropriate wording at council.
Thank you, Councillor Fleury, and I do see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand as well.
Yes, just a response to Councillor Brockington and your question about strengthening the federal government's role in national historic sites. You may or may not know this, but legislation has been tabled in the Senate by former Senator Serge Royal, which would actually amend the National Capital Act and specifically allow the NCC to be engaged in applications and provide approvals on properties that are private, but in the national capital that are national historic sites. This legislation has been tabled, and I think that if you obtain a copy of that, you will see that the sentiments that we would be conveying to the government are already in place. And that piece of legislation by Senator Joyal was in direct response to the controversy over the Chateau Laurier, because he was one of those persons that was heavily involved among the Friends of the Chateau Laurier to try to change the design. So I think that that's something that could be supported and followed up. And Chair King, I thought that that would be worthwhile just to table at this meeting.
Thank you so much. I think we do appreciate that insight from you, Member Podolsky. I do see Vice Chair Quinn's hand up. And I think you're muted, Vice Chair Quinn.
Thank you for that opportunity, for that comment, Member Podolsky. But I just wanted to add that I believe that that has fallen off the order paper, so it will need to be. It's not quite in limbo. It's going to need to be restarted. Just to make that point.
Thank you, Member and Vice Chair Quinn. I don't see any hands raised, so I will make a comment because the last time I made a comment was in 2019 at Council about the Chateau Laurier. It was really the first time I had an opportunity to speak on the topic, having just been elected less than 2 months prior. It was a debate that could only be best characterized as lively. I acknowledge that since that time, the application has substantially changed, and I am now the chair of this subcommittee, a role that I cherish in that it gives me a unique opportunity to give active voice to the protection of Ottawa's superb built heritage. In June 2019, the city's planning committee approved a site plan control application for a 7-story addition to the rear of the Chateau Laurier. That fall, the Committee of Adjustment ruled on minor zoning variances, a ruling that both Heritage Ottawa and the owner Larco Investments appealed to the LPAT. To settle that appeal, Larco consulted with Heritage Ottawa to revise its design rather than proceeding with the version the Planning Committee and Council had approved. As the new design is significantly different from the approved version, it requires approval of both a new heritage application and a revised site plan control application. Despite the long history and the many iterations of designs before us, collectively, it's hard to consider this file outside of the context of its design evolution. Frankly, it also does a disservice to the hundreds of hours spent by staff working on this file, for which I'd like to take the opportunity to thank them now. The application before us is very much a compromise, one brokered by Heritage Ottawa, who also spent many volunteer hours on this file. The proposal significantly increases the use of Indiana limestone along with complementary building materials. Further, the view from Majors Hill Park is improved with the carve out in the middle of the addition that simultaneously maintains the view of the original building and the U-shaped heritage feature of the building. These are design features that I'm generally pleased to see. I'm also cognizant that staff recommends approval of this permit as the proposed design meets the Standard 1 and Standard 11 of Parks Canada standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. I do take staff's recommendations seriously and can certainly see that the new addition is distinguishable of its own time and takes better cues and inspiration from the design of the historic building. Having said that, while I agree that this proposal meets the letter of the guidelines, I remain unconvinced, like my colleague, Councillor Brockington, that it meets its spirit. The report notes that the previous plans which came to Council and Committee also met the standards and guidelines, yet they elicited such a fervor from the general public that at that time, I had voted with colleagues to do the unprecedented and attempt to revoke the heritage permit. As you all know, that failed and we are now back and this application is before us. In my estimation, Ottawa is an intriguing city because of the delicate balance struck between its built form, both historical and contemporary, its streetscapes, neighborhoods, and landscapes. This delicate balance has defined Ottawa and its evolution over the last 2 centuries and embodies a collective memory and meaning that is lacking in most cities today. Conserving this heritage character while enhancing vitality and modern utility is key to retaining Ottawa's unique sense of place. Ultimately, the expectation of the public, and I believe future generations, is for development throughout the city that complements neighborhoods, communities, green spaces, and historic sites and landmarks. I would therefore concur with Member Quinn's belief that the federal government should seek greater protection over its national historical sites so that we aren't facing this type of challenge, especially around designs that might only get a grade C ranking from Member Podolsky. Wilfrid Laurier, the hotel's namesake, wrote in 1884 that Ottawa is not a handsome city, and it does not appear to be destined to become one. While I disagree wholeheartedly with our former Prime Minister's prognostication, I fear that approving this addition is a step backwards towards cementing his worst fears. Laurier himself established the Ottawa Improvement Commission, the first iteration of the NCC, with the view to beautify what was a sleepy lumber town, to make this addition to a building which is a national historic site, which is a piece of Canadian iconography. I can't help but think that this does not honor Wilfrid Laurier's legacy. This is not the fault of staff, and ultimately the crown jewel is private property. I do realize that aesthetics is subjective, and I never expected to see a proposal that was the same as the original building. I'm also aware that city staff have spent an astronomical amount of time on this application, and I have spent much time taking their recommendations into consideration. Staff's hard work and dedication has not gone unnoticed. Despite this, I'm still disappointed by the proposal and will not be supporting the application. As a consequence, I'll be voting no, and therefore will call for yeas and nays on this vote.
Chair, if we could please have a moment to, before starting the vote. Member Halsell, Member Podolsky,
Yes.
Councillor McKenney,
No.
Member Conforti,
Yes.
Councillor Brockington,
No.
Councillor Moffat,
Yes.
Vice Chair Quinn, Chair King.
No.
3 yeas, 3 nays, Chair.
This report is scheduled to be presented to Planning Committee later today. That meeting will be after the adjournment of this meeting. So we'll move to adjournment. As this is a special meeting, we are limited to the item listed in the notice and on the agenda, and accordingly, there is no other business. On adjournment, is the motion carried?
Carried.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. The next regular meeting of the subcommittee is scheduled for Tuesday,
Okay, so I'm hearing from Ms. Stephanie that we're ready to go. Let's do a quick quorum check. And so, Councillor Brockington? Yes, I can see you.
I'm here, sorry.
Councillor Judas?
I'm here.
I know that Councillor Hubley just had to step away for a moment, but he'll be joining us. Councillor Kitts?
Here.
Councillor Leeper?
Here.
Councillor Moffat? And Councillor Tierney. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Councillor Tierney? Yes.
Present.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the Special Planning Committee meeting on Friday, February 5th. I think that most of you were listening in to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, and I would remind you that our responsibility with regard to the Built Heritage is to take their voices and their votes under consideration. But for the record, they don't influence what we do. Okay, they report on heritage matters. I mean, we've even changed it a little bit, but I just want to remind you of that. So we have the same item before us. We also have the site plan before us. And we've had the presentations, the delegations. So this part is about questions for our staff. And on the first item, we will start, let's see. The application to alter the Chateau Laurier, 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Leeper has a question of staff on the Heritage Act. And
So,
as it relates to 1 Rideau Street.
So Chair, sorry, I guess it's a question about site plan. All right, I'll leave it.
Okay, so on the, no questions then on the application to alter the Chateau Laurier. I'll call, actually, first of all, let's move the technical amendment to Councillor Brockington, and let's get that out of the way. The technical amendment, this will be the third time it's been introduced this morning, first time formally for this committee.
I almost have it memorized, but I will read it, Madam Chair. As you said, it was read at the joint.
You don't have to read the whole thing.
No, I won't. I'll just read the therefore
Do not
clause.
read the whole thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Therefore, this is regarding updating the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement, document 10. Therefore, be it resolved that the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement listed as document 10 of the report for the application to alter the Chateau Laurier, 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, be replaced with the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement dated February 2nd, 2021 on file with the City Clerk.
Thank you. So does anyone have any questions on the technical amendment? I don't see anybody waving, so can we carry the technical amendment, please? Is it carried?
Carried.
Any objections? No objections. Okay. Now we will go on to the application to alter the Chateau Laurier, 1 Rideau Street. Planning Committee recommend that Council approve the application to alter a property designated in Part 4. We could have it up on the screen if you don't mind, and then I don't have to read it out loud. You all have it before you anyways. Okay. So let's have yeas and nays on the application to alter the Chateau Laurier, 1 Rideau Street. Councillor Brock.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just process point. If I have a comment on the report, when is it best suited?
On the heritage report or the site plan? Because the site plans, we haven't dealt with that yet.
I guess it'd be on the heritage report. Yeah, I guess the substantial is on the heritage report.
Well, then put your hand up because you weren't waving, so that's why I was going to the next stage. So Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for that, and thank you for clarifying.
this would be just on the heritage. Um,
Well, I'll do it all if you don't mind.
No, I have two separate items here. So go on the heritage first, and then we'll go to the site plan. Others may have questions on the site plan as well.
Okay, sounds good. So I do have one question to staff, and then I'll do, as Councillor King has done, the comments. So I'm unclear about the appeal rights. So maybe this is a legal question. The appeal rights of council's decision relating to the heritage permit and the further submission to the Committee of Adjustment. So could we get clarity on what is that appeal process and who could technically appeal it under what we saw today?
So under the current state of the law, there is a right of appeal by LARCO to the Conservation Review Board should they not be content with the decision by council. And the Conservation Review Board hears it and makes a recommendation, and that comes back to council. The law, the legislation to change this has been passed. It has not been proclaimed. When it is, then there will be an appeal right to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal can overturn the decision by council. The Conservation Review Board does not have that power. The appeals of the Committee of Adjustment decision, the two variances, are completely independent of the heritage process. And one was filed by LARCO, one was filed by Heritage Ottawa. The city has not taken party status in those appeals, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mark, for clarification. I'd make my comments, Madam Chair, about the latest submission and the considerations for Planning Committee on the heritage permit.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Brockington and Councillor King for their intervention a few minutes ago. And I do want to raise to the intention of committee members that I plan to work with colleagues who are interested in bringing forward a motion in front of council as it relates to the legal protection to the National Heritage Sites, a request that we would send to the federal government, as well as a deeper review of lessons learned from this process to see what tools we would need or what's been in place. So how we got here, I think, is complex. It's challenging, but ultimately it is a private applicant in LARCO that's submitted to the city. I too want to thank city staff for their time, for their constant follow-up and response and clarification to community as part of the entire process, not just the latest submission. So it's a lot of staff hours based on an application that we have very little control over. So really want to bring that to the attention of everyone. I also want to thank Heritage Ottawa. Heritage Ottawa has been put in a very challenging spot, and it's one of the unique times where an organization does an appeal and improves what was put in place, what was approved by the previous submission and process. It's left Heritage Ottawa in a challenging position. I know that they will rebound. I know that we need their continued engagement on heritage matter in our city, and I want to thank not just the entire board, but the entire membership for their work. I know that some members are left to rethink of the organization, but I would say that they really Heritage Ottawa has done tremendous work in our community and will continue to do so. So I want to thank Mr. Béliveau and the entire team. À ce qui a rapport au processus au comité.
When referring to the process in front of the committee today, my comments are simple and clear. I mean, enhancements were done, but like we mentioned earlier, we are a city, we are the national capital. We have to examine not only what we have, but the future of our city, the importance of the buildings that we have in our cities, in our city. For me, this is an addition that is difficult because we have all of these Fairmont castles that were built throughout the countries. They had similar additions that were made throughout the years. And they're there right now.
Again, Madam Chair, I do recognize the challenges of a process that committee and council are forced to follow. I do want to raise to committee that you do make decisions relating to property rights, and heritage permits do have influences on heritage matters. So I know that as part of the last round of submission, those were some of the comments that were raised, and I fear that every time we make a decision out of committee and council, there does have implication on rights, and it does have influence on that matter. So I do want to thank committee who's been patient, who's been engaged for the number of years. I want to make a last mention here, Madam Chair, and I know you've been chair throughout the process, but we've had three different built heritage chairs who have followed through the process, and I do want to make special mention to our former colleague Toby Nussbaum, who was involved initially, and then following that Councillor Gower and now Councillor King, who have worked I'd say hand in hand with yourself to make sure that public engagement was first and foremost, and that all the questions were asked and clearly answered. So certainly appreciate that all along. Encore une fois, je vous recommande au comité de...
Once more, I would like to recommend to the committee, the planning committee, to have a different position than last time and not to allow the heritage permit to go forward. I know you're in a very difficult position. Heritage Ottawa did improve and enhance the proposal, but like Councillor Brockington mentioned, it's not a passing grade that we have to accept, but we have to also be proud of the additions that will be put forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Gower, comments or questions on the application to alter the Chateau Laurier with Heritage Act? Do you have anything to say? Thank you.
Comment quickly. I guess I can't believe we're still debating over whether the design is historic enough. Really appreciated the comments from Member Conforti and the Built Heritage Subcommittee about the need to be designing for our own time. I look over the skyline of the city of Ottawa, and yes, we have the traditional Chateau Laurier and the Parliament buildings, but we also have the conference center, completely different design, but it fits in. It fits in perfectly now to our landscape. And even the concrete buildings of national defense, they've become something that are part of our city. It's the heterogeneity of our architecture that makes our downtown interesting and appealing to visitors, and picturesque in photos that people take when they visit here. The proponent has come forward with something that not everybody agrees with, and that's okay. I don't think as a committee we should be making our decisions based on the popular opinion. We should be listening to the architects, to the heritage community, and appreciating when we have private landowners who are coming to our city with something that could be a positive change. So that's all I wanted to say today, Chair. I'll be supporting the staff recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gower. Oh, sorry, Vice Chair Gower. Getting a little bit confused with where we are and who's in charge. So on the motion before you, approve the application to alter Chateau Laurier 1 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and with the conditions that are laid out in A, B, and C. I'll call for yeas and nays, please. So, Councillor Brockington.
No.
This is on the heritage again. No, did you say?
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower,
Yes.
and myself, yes. That is 7-2. Thank you, everyone. We'll go on to the next item, which is the revision to the site plan approval for 1 Rito Street. Questions of staff? Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to vote for the heritage permit. I think the loss of the view from that southern elevation simply
Yeah, have you got questions on this
on
one,
site
please?
plan. So I don't want to take a second kick at the can at the heritage permit through site plan.
Well, you could
Just
try,
wondering-
but I caught you on it.
No, I don't want to do it. Site plan is site plan, and I try to respect the integrity of that process. I just wanted to ask staff, were there any substantive site plan issues where there continue to be any kinds of disagreements? We've been looking at the heritage permit considerations mostly, but I just want to make sure I understand whether there were any site plan issues that we should keep in mind.
There are no new conditions being proposed. All of the changes related to this revision to the previous approval relate to the architecture, but there were some implications to the site plan matters caused by that change in architecture. There were some minor changes to how the stormwater was collected and held on site because of the changes to the roof. It went through a technical circulation. The comments raised by Parks Canada about drainage, that letter is included in Leslie's heritage report. Basically, Parks Canada asked to be involved in the kinds of construction planning work that needs to be done to ensure that when the excavation happens, there are no negative drainage implications to drainage to the canal from that excavation, and the geotechnical report was shared with them. So am I answering your question, Councillor?
Yeah, no, that's it. So Parks is not in front of us today asking us not to approve the site plan. So I assume that issue's been taken in hand then. No, that's good. Chair, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleury.
Yes, Madame la Présidente. My question is just in terms of again process. So you have a site plan. I've commented in it on it, and now there are matters that are in the National Capital Commission's hands. So how does that link work? How does the feedback you've received from the public and the city's goals through the site plan tie into the review of the National Capital Commission, and how is committee and council assured that those elements be carried forward? For example, Councillor McKenney was speaking earlier of the tree protection. I know that we've had conversations relating to the pavers that are existing on Mackenzie Avenue and tie in also on the terrace side of the chateau. So you've done a lot of that work, and want to make sure how is that carried through the National Capital Commission's review and process.
Planning Committee is not being asked to approve any of the measures that are on federal land. That jurisdiction is with the federal government, with the National Capital Commission. So just to reiterate what that is surface works along Mackenzie and some subsurface works for servicing connections along Mackenzie, subsurface works for servicing connections in Majors Hill Park, and alterations to the Rideau Canal terraces so that the new design has a staircase leading up from the lower terrace into the courtyard. And in terms of public consultation, the NCC could run their own public consultation on this. As was noted earlier, their advisory committee on design, property, and realty is expected to, which is similar to our urban design review panel, is expected to review this and offer comments to staff. And then there will be different levels of approval. Some approvals are delegated to staff, some are at the board level. So people would be able to participate by listening to the board decision and also by reaching out to NCC staff directly.
So just to clarify, Madam Chair, so elements that you as a planner and the team at the city have brought forward, could the NCC overturn that? Just to clarify what you're saying here, like you've gotten the applicant to improve some of the site plan. You're bringing those forward, recognize what you're saying around the NCC lands, but could the NCC have influence on overturning some of the changes you've requested?
Their influence is over the federal lands, not over the architecture of the building on the privately owned lands by Larco Investments.
I'll take it offline. I just point of clarification, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tiernan. And I just wanted to say that I neglected to recognize, because I didn't see him, that Eli El-Shantiri is here, Councillor El-Shantiri is here with us today as well. So I don't see any more questions. Welcome, Eli. You see, if you had your screen on, I would have seen you for sure. I don't see anybody else waving hands, etc. So
remember, we're in a rural area. Our broadband service is just rocky sometimes.
yeah, we need to do something about that for sure. I think that was an encore comments from yesterday. So on the planning committee approved a revision to the site plan control application approved in June 2019 for the construction of an addition to the Chateau Laurier at 1 Rideau Street as detailed in documents 5 and 6. I'm going to call for yeas and nays on that. Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower.
Yes.
And myself, yes. That is that 10-1, Melody? I think so. Melody, that's 10-1, or is it 9-1?
9-1.
9-1. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. So move adjournment. And before that, I'll tell you that our next meeting, there's a lot between now and then, isn't there? Is next Thursday. And it doesn't have that many items, but I think it's going to be a long meeting, just for your calendars, purpose of your calendars. And of course, next Wednesday, we have the growth management strategy at council. So I thank you for your attention. I thank the staff, I think, have done an amazing job. I don't think we've given enough credit, although we have given some credit to the work that Heritage Ottawa has done in working with us. I know that it was very, very tough for them, but having them at the table, that mattered more than words can say. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank the applicant, who could have appealed this a couple of years ago, who stayed in the game and worked on changes that mattered to Heritage Ottawa and our staff to make a better outcome. So thank you for that. And we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.